Hello everyone, and welcome to theCUBE's coverage of Chainguard Assemble here at the Glass House in New York City. I'm your host, Rebecca Knight, and I'm sitting alongside Paul Nashawaty, Principal Analyst at SiliconANGLE Research. Paul, this is very exciting. It's the second annual Chainguard Assemble, and we're here.
Absolutely, on this nice St. Patrick's Day. Look at the weather behind us, it's
beautiful
fantastic.
St. Patrick's Day, yeah. Great. No, it's a really fun event, good vibes happening. We're both fresh from the main stage, where we heard Dan Lawrence as well as other executives from here at Chainguard, as well as the who's who of AI right now. Dan Lawrence up there saying how this time last year, the company had 150 customers. Today, they are knocking on the door of 500 customers. Right. As an analyst, what does that signal to you about this company's trajectory and also the market's maturity too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Rebecca, this is a fantastic indicator in the market that's showing that there's an adoption and the need for security. It's shifting left, focus on the developers, so we see that a lot happening. But Chainguard really kind of does have that focus on securing the infrastructure, or the ecosystem as well, across the SDLC. So I think that's really a big factor here. We're seeing a lot of shifts for container support, a lot of shifts in security in general. Definitely it's growing, and I'm really excited to be here for this event because I think this, having conversations with Dan and Dustin and the team here at Chainguard really has been interesting to see where they're going.
Yeah, and you go way back with them. I know they've been on your podcast a number of times. Yes. So as I said, we're both fresh from the main stage, or we heard a number of keynote speakers, and you covered the space, which gives you a real view into the practitioners who are deep into the work, but they don't always necessarily see it from the perspective that you have. Yeah. There are really 5 key points in the keynote. Why don't you walk our viewers through them? And these are the messages that are coming out of Assemble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I think a lot of the messaging is kind of what the market's expecting, right? So we see secure software should be built. It shouldn't be patched later. It should be built at the part of at the build stage. We also saw as a second kind of point was automated software factories are the future, and this is automated assembly lines, right? I like this. I like where it's going with it. I still believe right now in 2026 we do need a human in the loop, but I think automated software factories are really where they're going to be the competitive advantage, especially as we start looking at security in those areas for faster patching, reproducible builds, as well as consistent security across the environment. So I think that's really a big factor. I think when we also look at another big factor that came out of the keynote was the open source as being the biggest challenge or supply chain risk. I agree. I think that's always been a challenge, but I think that there's hundreds or thousands of open source components that are being evaluated. The risk has to be mitigated.
And I think the point that he made is that open source, yes, it's always been this risk, but it's been the authoring, the architecture, and now it's much more in the review stage.
It is, but I also think he had a really good kind of...
He's good at analogies.
Good analogy, yeah, good. But they did demonstrations. So Dan had somebody come up on stage and had him cut a piece of wood, right? And then he comes with a handsaw. Then he comes back in with a power saw and he cuts the wood. And I'm thinking that is exactly what this kind of open source kind of supply chain risk is showing, right? It's showing you can look at it with hand tools, or you can actually use power tools to get it done.
Right, we're in the power tool era.
We absolutely are.
Indeed. Okay, so that was the 3. You went through 3. You had a couple of others.
I did.
So
the minimal harden and container risk for the attack surface, right? That's something that I've been hearing for a long time right now. So, but basically, what I'm seeing is it's actually coming to delivery. So fewer packages, fewer CVVs, and then also smaller runtime footprints. So distributing the containers amongst multiple areas. And then finally, this one I really was excited about was security must be invisible to developers. That was something that I thought was a key point to hit home. The developers are getting a lot thrown at them. Everything's shifting left, and we keep hearing that, and it's shifting everywhere at this point. But I think having security invisible to developers is key.
And so what does that actually mean in practice, that it is invisible?
Yeah, well, what it really means is it's not, developers are not slowed down, right? So what we see in our research, our 2025 research, we see that 24% of organizations want to release code on an hourly basis, yet only 8% are able to do so. And this is largely due to the fact that there's a lot of stops in the CI/CD pipeline across the SDLC. So historically what happens is the DevOps teams are pushing the code out the door as fast as they can because the business KPI is pushing it, but it's introducing problems. So now what we're seeing is, security teams instead of raising their hands going, hey, we have a problem, it's just invisible, it just works. So now we're seeing those patches are happening at the build time, not at the delivery time.
So that's the thing about tech, is that what makes it great is when it just works and you don't have to think about it.
Well, right,
That's
exactly,
the best kind
across
of
the
tech there
board.
is. So there were a few new product and services announcements. We heard from Patrick Donahue, who of course is the SVP of product. He talked a little bit about some of the new product services and features that they're rolling out here. What caught your eye in terms of Chainguard OS packages? Was that one of
it was
most interesting to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chainguard Factories is interesting to me because it increased automation by 200% for package coverage, a 2.6x average latency, and a 90% version update without human intervention. Again, I'm a fan of automation. I still think we need a human in the loop, but Chainguard Factories is a big area. Chainguard OS, you touched on that a little bit, but the package includes containers. It's included with containers and catalog customers. So if you're already getting catalogs today, you're going to get that Chainguard OS, and the growth on this catalog is really apparent. We're seeing, we saw in the keynote that there was a large adoption over the last year. Patrick did talk about a number of different things that I thought that caught my mind, and I'll name a couple. Is container growth and innovation that really provided and hardened community charts and enhanced SBOMs. Those were areas that stood out. Self-service is a big factor, was a big focus for Chainguard Catalog Starter. So now you can have that as a starting point. And then also secure by default is a request by the market. We see that with Chainguard commercial builds. And that's all was announced during the keynote. Lots of innovation coming out. Again, it's made really for that self-service developer model that kind of lets the code be developed without having the impact of security.
Yeah, self-service is definitely a theme here at Assemble. I want to ask you about another speaker who we heard from today, Dan Gillespie at OpenAI, and he had this framing around this idea that the bottleneck in software development is no longer writing code, it's establishing trust in that code. As someone who talks to organizations across the market, I'm wondering how widely that idea is landing, or are buyers thinking about that? Thinking about trust in that way yet?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I like the kind of the banter between Dan and Dan, right? I thought that was kind of cool, right? I mean, I know that they have a long-term relationship there. But OpenAI, Dan Gillespie kind of had OpenAI. They were confirming the growth and adoption. Of course they are, because that's also kind of dovetails into OpenAI. But the future of AI generations will push really the boundaries to achieve what users are expecting, right? So we're seeing that and the last time code was written by hand came up in the keynote, right? And I thought it was funny because these are technologists that have been around, and they're developers by nature, and they're saying, I can't remember the last time they wrote code by hand. We see in our own research, the theCUBE research, that 50% of production code was written by AI, and that was as of August 2025. And as of November and December, we saw that number increase to 70 to 90%. So we're seeing that, and it's that kind of handsaw versus power tool approach, right? It's like, how do you use this? You need to be competitively advantaged. So I think that these modern applications are really depending on the open source components, and Dan Gillespie kind of emphasized that point as well.
Right. But so I'm curious, what do you think is going to become of that? The fact that 70 to 90% of code is written by AI. Are the humans paying enough attention? I mean, in the sense of, should organizations trust in that, in the sense of having this human in the loop?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the organization's accountable for what gets created. So if you're using a power tool versus a hands tool, you're still responsible for the output, right? So if you're using AI to generate your code, you're still responsible. So I don't think it replaces the human. It definitely accelerates from an operational efficiencies perspective. And then and it does come down to a know, like, and trust. You have to trust. If this is becoming, more trustworthy for AI to be using these tools, or humans to be using these AI tools, then it'll be more widely adopted. I will say this, Rebecca, that In my mind, I saw 2025 as the year of innovation and experimentation. I see 2026 as the year of implementation. And that's where I think that the trust factor is coming into play.
Right, organizations are really believing in this and using it to move the needle.
They have to, because they have, well, either they have to or figure out how to accept it, because otherwise they'll be at a competitive disadvantage.
Okay, so we've got a great show, lots of incredible speakers joining us here on theCUBE. Any final observations or notes of interest that you would like to leave our viewers with today as we are about to embark on these conversations, Paul?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that was brought up is the future is now. Like we had a lot of starts and innovation and challenges kind of coming together. It's only going to get better from here. And that was, I'm stealing those words from the keynote, right? That was what was said on the keynote. And I agree with that, because I think that once we start learning and understanding how these tools work, then it's going to make our jobs more efficient and more effective.
Yes, and it is interesting, particularly at a time where so many Americans still fear AI, to have this real optimistic note and not a scaremongering, that the future is, it's only going to get better.
Absolutely, and you have to remember, companies like Chainguard that are in place here today, they're the good guys protecting us from these things. There's also equally the bad guys that are using AI
as well
to use these tools. So we have to have that both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I want to talk to Dan about that for sure.
Absolutely.
Paul, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to today.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm Rebecca Knight. Stay tuned for more of theCUBE's coverage of Chainguard Assemble. You're watching theCUBE, the leader in enterprise tech news and analysis.